Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University School of Social Work, SOSW. Certificate in HIV Family Education, CAFE. BFEE-104 Communication and Counselling in HIV. Block 1 Basics of Communication. Unit 4 Interpersonal, Group and Media of Communication Mass Communication. 4.0 Objectives. In this unit we aim at understanding communication from the three perspectives of interpersonal, group and mass communication levels. The unit presents various skills required to communicate at interpersonal level, such as speech, listening, use of language, etc. In group communication, we aim at enabling the students to be familiar with the group process, conducting group meetings and leadership qualities for effective group communication. In the final section on mass communication, we study the elements of mass communication, the constituent factors, SMCR, and the functions of mass communication in the life of individuals and society. The aim of the entire unit is to help students develop practical skills in using group media effectively as well as to critically analyze the way mass communication media affects society. 4.1 Introduction. Communication is broadly divided into three categories: interpersonal, group and mass communication. In this section we shall briefly try to understand what each of these types of communication mean and how we can use them effectively. 4.2 Interpersonal communication. What is of interpersonal communication? Interpersonal communication is communication between two persons or between one person and a group. When communication takes place between two persons, it is called dyadic communication. Interpersonal communication is direct and not mediated by media technology. Interpersonal communication is needed for the maintenance and development of personal relationships as well as social systems. It is difficult to think of any social group functioning as a unit or group without interpersonal communication. A community or group is not merely an assortment of individuals, but a cohesive unit. It gets a sense of unity and identity as a result of communication. Relationships are created and maintained by interpersonal communication. Basic elements in interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication may be verbal or non-verbal. In this process, both the sender and receiver are aware of the process of interaction by which messages are sent and received. We may identify two kinds of interpersonal communication: transaction and interaction. By transaction we mean private talk between friends, family members, lovers, etc. This kind of communication is more informal and do not need to conform to public or social rules. In interaction, on the other hand, people relate to each other within the framework of certain established norms and rules of behavior. These include social etiquette, religious or social norms that govern conduct, speech, etc. Most relationships begin with interaction and move on to the level of transaction. In interpersonal communication, the process of sending and receiving takes places almost simultaneously, so much so it is not always easy to say when a person is sending or when one is receiving a message. For instance, the one who is talking to another individual or a group besides sending messages searches for the reaction of his audience. He adjusts the message according to the feedback he is getting from his listeners. If the listener is seen to be bored or disinterested, the speaker may skip some portions of what he wants to say, or change topics, or stop speaking altogether. The one who communicates must constantly adjust his or her message according to the reactions of the listeners, attention, ability to grasp, approval. He or she must constantly monitor the facial expressions, gestures, sounds, etc. of his audience. In interpersonal communication, there is constant interaction and both the parties speak or communicate. The interpersonal communication process is flexible. For instance, a grandmother who tells tales or sings lullabies to put a child to sleep. The grandmother stops the story or the song even before it is completed, if she sees the child has already fallen asleep. We receive most of the information about ourselves and other people through interpersonal communication. The amount of information we receive and its value will depend on the degree of our willingness to enter into communication with others and our willingness to share information with them. Interpersonal communication involves choices. It calls for making decisions. We can communicate or choose to ignore persons or groups we encounter. For instance, in traveling in a railway compartment, we may be in the midst of strangers. We may travel a long distance without any communication, or we may strike up a conversation and then begin to build relationships by means of interpersonal communication. Many of our acquaintances and friends are the result of efforts we have made or willingness we have shown in order to enter into interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication calls for skills in order to interact effectively with others. Knowledge of social norms and behavior and etiquette, ability and willingness to listen, concern and respect for one another, willingness to share about oneself, etc., are also important components which make for successful interpersonal communication. Barriers to interpersonal communication. There can be several barriers that block interpersonal communication. These include social or cultural prejudices, superiority-inferiority complexes that affect people because of religious affiliation, cultural notions about oneself, economic status, ethnic identity. In India, the caste system and caste hierarchy can prevent effective interpersonal communication between people belonging to different caste categories. Even though such barriers block effective communication, interpersonal communication can be used as an effective means to overcome social differences. Cultural biases constitute another barrier in interpersonal communication. The idea of racial superiority promoted by Hitler led to the killing of millions of Jews. Social barriers include prejudices against women, discrimination against the socially marginalized, the economically disadvantaged, etc. Barriers in communication include also communication gap due to differences of age, mentality, and attitudes, lack of communication between married partners, members of a family, etc. These can lead to boredom, frustration, loneliness, dejection, and other personality complexes. Failure to interact effectively at the interpersonal level leads a person to be withdrawn, cut off from society. More aggressive forms of such maladjustment can even lead to violent behavior, suicide, etc. Success in interpersonal communication would mean overcoming these and other barriers. It involves both partners in the process. Inability to communicate effectively on the interpersonal level is the root cause of many social and family disorders. Effective interpersonal relationship can build a family and community, build up social cohesion. Effective social communication equips individuals and groups with what David Reisman refers to as internal radar, which enables one to adopt and adjoin oneself to fit into society. Merits of interpersonal communication. One of the benefits of interpersonal communication is that it establishes and sustains our social moorings. When people communicate with each other effectively, they find others with whom they can associate. They develop identities such as friends, lovers, colleagues, bosses, neighbors, family members. Interpersonal communication helps people fit into society and receive acceptance, thus get rid of loneliness and boredom. It assists in accomplishing one's goals with others. Interpersonal. Communication may serve as the ground for cooperation and collaboration in achieving what we want our goals. It helps people to identify and follow rules of social interaction. Our society is governed by rules. Violation of rules or our inability to follow social norms may lead to rejection and isolation. Interpersonal communication calls for skills. Skills can be acquired or learned. The ability to acquire skills and to become proficient in their use depends on several factors such as drives and needs, rewards and reinforcement, perceptive and cognitive faculties, aptitudes, attitudes and environment, personality of the individual, psychological, biological factors, sociological factors, learning abilities of the individual, motivation and willingness to learn. Interpersonal communication skills. Speech, language. Though the origin of human speech remains obscure, with reasonable certainty, we can assume that human beings were born with an instinct of speech. Vocal. Communication has been a significant step in the history of human civilization. The development of language, through its primitive form and over several centuries, contributed substantially to enhance the process of interpersonal communication. In order to use communication effectively, one needs to have effective speaking skills, oratory or rhetoric, mastery of language and effective use of vocabulary, which form important elements in communication, can be acquired by learning and perfected by practice. Body language. In some cultures, people use their hands and face a lot to convey messages. The body language or gestures are important in order to keep the attention of the receiver. A magician or puppeteer or a clown in a circus shows how body language is an important component in effective interpersonal communication. Identification with people, empathy and understanding. Interpersonal communication can become a very creative form of reaching out to others by bringing comfort to people, alleviating their sorrow or sufferings, helping them to overcome loneliness and boredom. The counselors, religious leaders, relief workers and sometimes media persons who visit people in adverse circumstances, as in an accident or natural disaster, do this. Listening. Interpersonal communication involves two or more individuals and it provides a congenial atmosphere for communication. It should be two-way, interactive, and mutual. Listening is an essential element of such communication. Though listening is an important element in communication, this skill is often neglected in training programs in communication skills. Listening skills can be developed by means of training. Listening is more than just hearing the words of the speaker, but trying to grasp the meaning. Meanings are constructed by the listener, and this calls for paying attention to factors like gestures, facial expression, silences or pauses, voice modulation, etc. Listening can improve the performance of families, industry, business, etc. In a company where the supervisors and managers are poor listeners, there can be many problems. Effective listening can reduce tension, conflict, and improve the morale and motivation of the staff. Interpersonal communication is participatory. Interpersonal communication is participatory. The chances of communication breakdown are much less as the communication partners are face-to-face and the words and symbols are picked up and interpreted in the presence of each other. The feedback is instantaneous as expressed in the form of body language or verbal assent or dissent. Subir Ghosh narrates how in the days before microphones came into use, Gandhiji addressed vast multitudes in open spaces where the people in the front conveyed his words to those sitting or standing behind them. Gandhiji chose his words and timed them so as to help this process. It was extremely effective because it involved Receivers of the message in the act of communication. In spite of the rapid progress in the information and communication technology, ICT, the most powerful and persuasive, the most effective means of communication continues to be the one in which an individual speaking to another. Recent developments in teleconferencing and electronic chat or widespread use of mobile and cellular phones are only limited expressions of the warm, intimate, personal communication. Interpersonal communication can also be used to build cooperation and resolve conflicts. Many of the social conflicts today can be traced back to poor knowledge of others, be they members of a family, religious group, political party, or other social organization. Conflict resolution and promotion of peace can be made effective through interpersonal communication. In international relations and global efforts to resolve conflicts between nations, the process of interpersonal communication is being used effectively today. Persons representing the governments or the countries or other organizations need good communication skills in bringing about the desired results. 4.3 Group communication. What is group? A group is a form of social organization composed of a number of individuals, identifiable by their physical proximity within recognizable boundaries. An individual may belong to more than one group simultaneously. Since the large majority of us do not live alone, we consequently live in groups, all kinds of groups. Robert Bierstedt. We have friends, acquaintances, we live in a particular place, and we have a distinct address. We have biological differences like being male or female, young or old. Our educational background, profession, economic status, religious affiliation, etc. distinguish us and make us belong to one or more groups at the same time. According to Baker, a group is a number of people who have a common goal, interact with one another to attain the goal, recognize one another's existence, and see themselves as part of the group. Kinds of groups. Groups are divided into primary and secondary groups. According to Charles Horton Cooley, primary groups are those which are composed of individuals with intimate, personal relations and who interact face to face, figuratively and not literally. It is the degree of intimacy or social distance rather than physical distance that determines the primary group. The family is considered a primary group. Other examples of primary group are playgroups, kinship groups, labor groups, clan, etc. Secondary groups are all those in which individuals have formal, impersonal, and status relations. All other groups, which are not primary, are considered secondary. In secondary groups, emotional affinity and personal involvement are less. They have goal-oriented relationship rather than person-related relationships. Political parties, associations, labor unions, religious groups, etc. are considered secondary group. Every individual is a member of primary as well as secondary group at one and same time. Groups may be statistical, according to demographic arrangements; societal, composed of people who have a common consciousness of kind who are aware of the similarity or identity of the traits or characteristics that they all possess; social, those in which people are actually associated with one another and have social relations with one another; associational groups, members of various associations organized into groups having a formal structure; people who are conscious of common interests, who have joined together in order to pursue those interests. Group communication is interpersonal communication by genre, but differs from it in form. In group communication, the partners interact face to face. The persons in the group may belong to homogeneous or heterogeneous group depending on their social context. Group communication can take place at formal and informal levels. Characteristics of group in relation to individual. There are several factors that characterize an individual's relation to the group. These include 1. Membership. One of the ways of belonging to a group is through membership. Membership may have different implications, duties, privileges, benefits, etc. 2. Dependence. Membership in a group may make a person dependent on the group for many of his needs. Members of a labor union depend on the group to improve their economic condition. Members of a political party may have thoughts of attaining power. 3. Acceptance, attraction. Individuals join groups to get a sense of acceptance. They are attracted to a particular group because they feel attracted to it due to the manner in which the members behave and interact with one another. Sense of belonging, acceptance, job satisfaction, sense of fulfillment, etc. 4. Volition. A member may belong to a group on a voluntary basis, as in the case of sports clubs, etc. Or may be innate, by birth, as in the case of citizenship, caste, religion, etc. Even if they are imposed, one can exercise certain amount of freedom to break out of the group. 5. Pressure of groups on individuals. The groups apply pressure on individuals to belong to and to conform to certain standards of the group. Though they may impose certain restrictions on the individual's way of behavior, he or she can also expect certain benefits. Thus the group and the individual mutually benefit from such conformity. 6. Change and flexibility. No group is rigid and static. All human groups undergo change. There is flexibility in the manner in which the group functions. Change and flexibility, however, are not arbitrarily imposed, but are evolved as a result of communication. 7. Leadership. The way the group exists and functions will very much depend on the kind of leadership it has. The role and function of leader in group communication. Leadership is explained a process by which activities of the group are coordinated. Members are motivated and certain tasks are accomplished. The leader may exercise power or position to enforce these or persuade the compliance from the members. The role of a leader is pivotal in the functioning of a group, setting up goals, attaining them, improving the quality of communication and interaction among the members, building cohesiveness of the group. The leader leads the group in task-oriented roles which include initiation of discussion, giving and receiving information, elaboration and clarification, orientation and summarization, tests of consensus. A leader also exercises maintenance roles such as harmonizing, compromising, supporting and encouraging, gatekeeping, standard setting and testing. Characteristics of a leader. A leader is described as one who knows the way, shows the way and goes the way. Leaders should also have a good grasp of the problem. They should be well informed and be able to analyze issues, have capacity for problem solving. Familiarity. They are familiar with the group, its members, background. Openness. Leaders should be able to encourage and support. They must be free from prejudice and be open to ideas and opinions of others. Communication skills. They should possess good command of the language, ability to articulate ideas in writing and in speech, have public speaking skills, capacity to listen, etc. Team spirit. An effective leader is basically a team person with the capacity to get the whole group or at least a majority to move in certain direction in order to attain the goals set before it. Other attributes for leaders include intelligence, energy, endurance, and social status, wealth, innovativeness, creativity. Styles of leadership. Democratic. Democratic leaders follow the norms of participatory guidance and work towards consensus and shared goals. They avoid use of force or power. They promote communication among members, encourage freedom of expression, creativity and initiative. Authoritarian leaders have strong goals and they guide the group members to get to the goal disregarding the individual views. They may have efficiency, but conflicts are likely to arise in such leadership. Laissez-faire do not direct the group effectively, but often function as observers and recorders. Laissez-faire leaders make themselves available for advice and consultation, serve as a reference point, and will not interfere in the working of the group. This kind of leadership is useful when all the members are committed, creative and mature to work towards the goal. Communication and groups. Group communication situations are quite common in day-to-day life. The home, the school, the temple or church, the workplace, the playground, the community center, the club and the street gang are all situations where group communications take place. The degree of formality governing the jurisdiction of the participants in group communication activity differs according to the context. The degree of formality increases in proportion to the formality of the organization. Thus, the context of communication in a family will be different from that of a professional group, like that of lawyers, chartered accountants, captains of industry, etc. Besides the context, group communication is influenced by several heterogeneous factors like age, sex, education, economic, social, linguistic, religious, national, regional, racial differences. The careful balance of interaction indeed no longer exists in group communication. Participation in this communication includes more than two persons. There may be special functions and roles assigned to individuals in the group, which creates unequal potential for receiving and transmitting information. In a group, one person may be the source of information, others receivers or distributors of the information. The extent of participation of individuals decreases in proportion to the increase in the number of individuals in the group. In other words, the larger the group, the less personal and direct is the exchange. The level of mutual understanding becomes lesser as the size of the group becomes larger. According to Baker, the best size in terms total interaction and greatest efficiency is somewhere between 5 and 7 members. Each person influences and is influenced in turn by the communication. Small groups tend to be more informal, less structured and more participatory. If the group is too large, there can be monopoly by one or two individuals. Participation may be replaced by domination and control. The degree of directness, spontaneity and intimacy may be lost. These affect the free and frank sharing of ideas and exchange of views. Some of our best and most enjoyable time is spent in communicating with groups. Family groups, social group, learning groups, and work groups. In order to get the best results from a group, the goals must be clear, and all must be willing to achieve the goals. The aim of a social group may be to have some good time together, while that of a working group may be to accomplish some result-oriented tasks. Participation and sharing of information is central to the functioning of a group. Communication in its root meaning refers to commonness, and the group which succeeds best is the group that has greatest degree of commonness. Communication in an informal group. Communication in an informal group may be marked by the following. 1. It attempts to achieve cohesion among members. 2. Emergence of group norms. According to Dennis McQuail, the more people are in communication with each other in group situations, the more likely are shared norms to develop. 3. Pressure from the group to conform to the norms and standards the group sets for itself. 4. Physical constraint on diversity and frequencies of communication which varies in relation to the size of the group. The larger the group, the greater the physical constraint. 5. Internal differences according to status and mutual regard, which can give rise to cliques and coteries, which may throw up leadership. Group discussion and communication. Group meetings and discussions have become part and parcel of seminars and conferences. They are used to increase participation by which everyone is involved in the process of evolving ideas and plans, planning activities, or problem solving. When a group discussion is conducted effectively, a variety of points of view emerge. In general, people prefer the democratic and participatory process of decision-making and governance. People tend to accept more easily a decision taken by a committee or a group rather than one individual. Individuals accept more easily decisions arrived at through a process in which they have participated. The process may be time-consuming and expensive. The process of arriving at a decision may necessitate several sessions, much time as well as cost. A discussion may be conducted in various ways depending on the purpose and the participants. Committee. A committee may be a small group appointed for a purpose and is expected to study a problem, collect facts, make decisions, report to the General Assembly, propose recommendations, effect changes, etc. as the mandate given to it may indicate. A committee may be appointed for a short period of time to investigate or study a particular problem. The government sets up committees to study corruption charges, crime, accidents, etc. Committees appointed or elected to govern or oversee the functioning of organizations may be given stipulated period of time, 1 year or more. Managing Committee of a school, the Parliamentary Committee for Revision of Salaries, the Constitutional Review Committee, etc. A committee is normally headed by a chairperson or a president. Conference. A conference is a much larger group than a committee. Hence it is also more formal. A conference may affect a wide variety of people and cover issues of importance to the participants. A conference may last longer than a meeting. It may have experts to present papers, guide discussions, and propose suggestions. If the number of participants are too large to have proper interaction, sessions or discussions may be held in smaller groups. Group meetings. One can master the basic skills and techniques for organizing a meeting and conducting a group discussion. Those who are inexperienced should begin with small groups. The composition of the group. The composition of the group and the ability of individuals in the group are the most important factors that determine the quality of communication in the group. The members should have some kind of common objectives, homogeneity in terms of the issues discussed. However, the group should have a good representation of the various sections of society or audience which is concerned with the issue. The group should also be briefed ahead of time about the agenda of the meeting, the objectives and the goals to be achieved. Chairperson of the meeting. The chairperson of the meeting or the group leader has certain responsibilities towards the group. He or she should have a good and calm temperament and skills and knowledge to conduct a meeting well. We list below some of the qualities that he or she should have. Encourage discussion and ensure everyone is invited to share his/her views and opinions. When a member wishes to disagree, it should be done without offense. Create an atmosphere where each one can express himself/herself freely, audibly, concisely. The chairperson must make sure that everyone pays attention and that order and decorum is maintained while someone is speaking. Ensure brevity and conciseness. Time management is a skill the group leader ought to master. The sessions should not be unduly long. If the issues being discussed require more time, a break could be taken. If required, another meeting could be fixed. It is Better to get a consensus of the group members for taking such decisions. The leader of the group or chairperson should, in other words, promote informality in the group. Display calm and patience even when things may go out of control. Invite members to listen to the views of others. Restrain from commenting on what each one has said or add one's views too frequently. Avoid taking sides or indicating in any way that you are partial. Praise and comment everyone, especially the timid, the less forthcoming persons. It is the duty of the leader to see that the group do not deviate from the main topic. However, some warming up exercises or informal interaction may be allowed, especially at the beginning, in order to help build better intimacy and a climate of sharing. The leader or someone else should write down the minutes of the proceedings, especially the important ideas discussed. Before the meeting is wound up, it is good to summarize the main points discussed, and the chairperson could briefly address the group. If the meetings are a routine event, it is customary to start the meeting with the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting and approving it. If there are communications to be made, it could be done at the beginning of the session or at the end. Physical arrangements. The physical setting for the meeting is important to ensure effective participation. The setting may vary according to the number of participants and the nature of the meeting. In a large conference or meeting, the members may be seated as in an auditorium. Even if each member is given a mic to speak, such meetings tend to become formal and the statements each one makes become isolated. Though the setting may be useful for a formal session, it is less suited to an informal discussion. There is little face-to-face communication or eye contact. Hence, in order to have effective participation, the seating should be circular rather than linear. When the members sit in a circle, it enables them to have better eye contact and follow the body language and can listen to the views more effectively. Round tables, movable chairs arranged in a circular way with the possibility of movement is the best. The room should have good ventilation, lighting, etc. Visual aids. A group meeting can be made more alive with the help of visual aids like writing boards, overhead projects or slide projectors, LCD projectors, charts, maps, diagrams, figures, etc. If they can contribute to better discussion. Concluding a meeting. The leader of the meeting should be able to summarize the major points of discussion, conclusions arrived at, if any. He or she should thank the group members for their presence and active participation. 4.4 Mass communication. Definition. Mass communication may be defined as the spreading of a message to an extended mass audience through rapid means of reproduction and distribution at a relatively inexpensive way to the consumers. In mass communication, the message is transported from its original source to a large and widespread audience or receivers by means of such intermediary channels, such as newspapers and books, radio, television, cinema, internet, etc. Mass communication, according to Emery, means delivering information, ideas, and attitudes to a sizable and diversified audience through the use of media developed for that purpose. Elements of mass communication. Mass communication has the following elements: relatively large audience, masses; fairly undifferentiated audience composition; same form of message reproduction; rapid distribution and delivery; low unit cost to the recipient's customers; uses technology, print, electricity, electronics, satellites; is transmitted or distributed across geographically distant areas and dispersed audience. Mass communication lacks many of the advantages of interpersonal and group communications like individual attention, face-to-face interaction, eye contact, instant feedback, etc. Mass communication, by its nature, is impersonal. SMCR. We have discussed in the previous units about the four important constituents of communication, namely source, message, channel, and receiver, SMCR. In mass communication, these elements assume important roles and functions. The source may be an individual like the nationwide address of the president, or an institution or a media organization like a newspaper firm or a television station. The message is determined by the kind of media used for transmission or distribution. A newspaper report of an event is quite different from the same event presented on television or radio, though in essence the message remains the same. Each medium of mass communication has its own specifications. The channel assumes great importance in mass communication. Though channels are instruments of mass communication, often they are mistakenly considered to be the phenomenon of communication itself. The modern media like newspapers, radio, television, etc., which constitute the channel, multiply the message and make it reach a vast audience at an enormous speed. The ability of mass media to overcome the limitations of time and space made Marshall McLuhan describe the world today as the global village. Channel is broadly divided into print media and electronic media. However, with the application of electronics to printing and the rapid distribution of news using satellites and internet have narrowed down the distinction between print and electronic media. Receiver is the mass audience with certain common characteristics such as common interest and needs, but unknown or impersonal with little interaction among themselves. The great advantage of mass media is their ability to reach vast number of receivers with the message within a short time. Their great disadvantage is the inability to know the effects of the same communication and to check the response or to collect feedback. Functions of mass communication. Mass communication media are interlaced with the very fabric of our lives that it is not easy to identify the functions they have for each person. In order to understand how media functions in society, we must observe carefully how and why people read newspapers, watch television, listen to radio, or go to the movies. Though we may be able to collate various common functions among the audience, we will also discover how people use media for a variety of functions. This is called the functions approach. In analyzing the functions of mass communication, our study should not be limited to what people do with media, but what media do to the people, how they affect opinions and attitudes, culture, habits, etc. This is called the effect approach. Social scientists are concerned with both the processes. One of the first scholars to call attention to the social functions of communication was Harold Laswell. He first considered these functions in terms of categories found in any society. He identified three type functions common to any society. 1. Surveillance of the environment. Media serve as watchmen. Some use the word informer. Mass media serve as the ears, eyes and voice of the audience. We accept their reports and use them as a basis for shaping our thoughts, attitudes and actions. For instance, the advertisements make known to us the new products. They help the customer to make purchasing decisions. At an individual level, the surveillance of the environment function of media increase personal esteem, provide base for social interaction, provide knowledge and information, confers social status and prestige. 2. Correlation. The second function mass communication serves for the society according to Laswell is correlating the response of the whole society to the environment, that is developing public opinion. Communication helps to create consensus in a society on key issues. An informed or enlightened opinion is essential for a healthy democracy. 3. Transmission of social inheritance. Today media have assumed the functions of transmitting social inheritance. which was done by parents, teachers, and other elders. Media today provide main frames of reference to society. Urbanization, relative anonymity, social uprootings, and the shift from traditional social organizations like joint family clan have increased the role of media as transmitters of knowledge and values. Mass media have today become essential to carry out functions of socialization and transmission of social heritage. 4. Dysfunctions associated with mass communication. Laswell recognized that mass communication can be dysfunctional or harmful as well as functional for a society, a ruling class or governments that fears public opinion or is autocratic can withhold information and even mislead the people through misinformation, false propaganda. Dysfunction may also be due to inability to sue the mass communication media skillfully or to process information effectively. People use media for a variety of purposes. We list some of the functions served by mass communication media: to persuade people to act in certain ways, to satisfy the need for information, to get entertainment, for escape, cinema as can dreams, release of tension and boredom, catharsis of Aristotle, security and reassurance, companionship, social interaction, status, social change and transformation, to understand how the political system and the government work, to maintain stability, to maintain status quo, to enforce social norms, to service political system, to service economic system, to facilitate social cohesion, to interpret society to itself. Mass media serve many functions for our society. In a sense, they are like the contemporary manifestations of the family or the tribe. Mass communication has forged new relationships and new identities for individuals as well as society. Media, in good part, determine today who and what is important. No social system today can ignore mass communication media, which have powerful sway over society, especially the urban society. The functions of media extend to every segment of society: politics and government, economic activity, business and industry. Advertisements stimulate desires, create new needs as well as standardize goods and services. The entertainment media reinterpret the values and norms of society. Mass media have entered human life in such a way that today it is nearly impossible to think of life without them. However, it may be noted that the functions of media exist not primarily because of what the media are or do, but rather because of the way we and their society use them. 4.5 Let us sum up. In this unit we have studied the three different kinds of communication, namely interpersonal, group and mass communication. Though we live a highly sophisticated mass-mediated world where the speed of communication has increased in a mind-boggling way, the basic principles of human interaction continue to be more or less unchanged. Though the mass media give the impression of being the most dominant communicator, experience tells that most of our today communication takes place when we interact with one another at a personal level. Hence, we can trace the roots of mass communication and group communication to the interpersonal communication. As we are exposed to the inescapable reality of the information age, we need to view the three types of communication we have described as complementary and not as something opposed to each other. We also need to be constantly alert and sensitive in order to ensure that the functions we want media to carry out for us and the way they influence us are to our well-being. It is for us to decide whether we should be the masters or slaves of the mass communication media. Thank you.